So the ANC's National Working Committee is currently in KwaZulu-Natal and it's conducting a thorough evaluation of the party's organizational health and the effectiveness of local governments nationwide. This visit, led by the ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa, follows a directive from the National Executive Committee. Of course, the ANC lost its majority in the province, receiving just over 17% of the vote. The ANC is now the third biggest party. This is after the MK and IFP in the province. But for more on this, we are now joined by the ANC's national spokesperson, Zuko Godlimpi. Zuko, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to start with this, and I think that this is just really the more basic of questions, right? And why it was important for you to have this, I suppose, assessment of the health of the organization now. Is that to say that in the run-up to this election, with the strength of the IFP and perhaps certainly the rise of the MK party, that the ANC did not foresee a 17% result in the province?
Thank you very much, Naledi. We certainly did not foresee a 17% decline in the province. We did, of course, anticipate that there would be a decline, that the new political formation, MKP, would have some impact. We just didn't think that it would be a double-digit impact once off. But just to also say that we were in KZN on the run-up to elections. We spent a week here as the National Executive Committee, and partly to try gear up our structures to counter the impact of those political parties. We are now doing a post-facto analysis, of course, not so much to look back and say, oh, how did we lose? But it's also to say, now that we've lost, do we have the organizational capacity necessary to rebuild our electoral fortunes going forward into the 2026 local government elections?
Yeah, you know, there's a lot to unpack, because when you look at what Government of National Unity looks like from a national point of view, and then you look at what it looks like at provincial level, sometimes a very different picture. And we'll get to Gauteng in a minute. But let's stay in KZN. The opportunities for perhaps a difference in how government looks there, if the ANC is in any shape or form working or willing to look at its political partnerships in the province. As part of this assessment, I'm sure that's going to be a big talking point, right?
Yes, it's a big talking point. Remember, the Government of National Unity and the governments of Provincial Unity are a reality that arose out of the electoral outcome. So it was nothing planned for. So it does shock the senses, including amongst ANC members, to try and understand what does it mean to suddenly be working in a government format that includes the IFP and the DA and the NFP in the context of KwaZulu-Natal. And it has its own permutations as well that members of the ANC have got to contend with, including the fact that the key ministries such as cooperative governance and traditional affairs are now held by Inkatha Freedom Party, which is the historic political competitor of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal. What does that mean for the efficacy of local government and the sort of interventions that will flow from that? Those are the issues that are under discussion. But the idea, of course, is that regardless of how government is constituted, the ANC still needs to retain an independent capability to interact with communities through its structures and to intervene in instances of service delivery needs without relying on government as much. But also the ANC is still in control of many local government authorities in KwaZulu-Natal, including eThekwini and Pietermaritzburg, as the major metropolitan centers. The key issue is how do our structures understand their role in relation to improving service delivery provision. On issues such as water and electricity, those have been major talking points for the electorate in KwaZulu-Natal. As we've dealt with load shedding on the national grid level, we still have the problem of load reduction across all metropolitan centers in South Africa, and KwaZulu-Natal is not an exception. What does the ANC do to improve the sustainability and predictability of electricity supply in these metropolitan centers? So those are the questions that are under discussion now in trying to build positive momentum for the ANC as it tries to regain lost ground.
Yeah, but you need to be in government to have those discussions around service delivery. I mean, you must look at the fact that 2021 local government elections, the ANC losing 21 municipalities. And so this is why I asked the question around political partnerships and what they look like. In Mapumulo, for instance, news reporting that the ANC ending its partnership there with the EFF. So where are the political party partnership opportunities that are available to you there? It seems that things are still quite sour with the EFF in KZN? What are they looking like? Perhaps, or is a partnership with the MK party completely out of the question? Perhaps that's the right question to ask.
If you recall, even during the discussions about the government of national unity, the ANC did not rule out working with anybody. It wanted to work with as broad a collective of political parties as they would be willing to agree on a common policy platform as contained in the statement of intent in the context of national government. The EFF and MK party voluntarily chose not to agree to the terms of that and locked themselves outside of that. But just to also make the point that the partnerships that are falling apart are the legacy partnerships after the 2021 local government election. And at the time, the ANC had gotten into these coalition agreements without having an adopted national coalitions framework, which specifies a common governance charter that must underpin any coalition that the ANC gets into in local government. So part of what the ANC has said is that we need to stabilize local government by reviewing across the board the coalition agreements that we got ourselves into at local government level. That is why there's been a change of leadership in eThekwini. That is why there's been a change of leadership in Johannesburg. And that is why you are seeing that falling apart of the agreement in Maphumulo. And that is the work that the ANC has got to get into. Our structures are going to talk to all political parties represented in those councils, but on the basis of a principled governance charter that specifies the areas of policy cooperation that we're going to get into, so that we don't fall into the old trap of forming coalitions that are based on brinksmanship and blackmail, but are not principled in how they are structured.
Okay, I want to look at the point that's been made around Gauteng, and I think that this is important because we can certainly focus on KZN, but this is where I think the ANC certainly has been hardest hit, right? KZN and Gauteng. And you talk about how, well, from a national point of view, even in talks of government of national unity, the ANC said it was not willing to talk to any political parties, but the EFF and the MK party not coming to the table with the terms and conditions. But at a national level, the ANC agreeing to work with the Democratic Alliance is not what it looks like in Gauteng, right, where the Democratic Alliance is not part of that Gauteng legislature. What do you make of what's happening there? This weekend, the Gauteng chairperson making a point that the ANC is a ship that is sinking and we are squabbling amongst ourselves. Are there concerns around the leadership of the ANC in Gauteng and being able to carry the mandate of the party?
Okay, two things that are separate. The situation in Gauteng was a product of a decision we took earlier on that the negotiation at national and provincial levels are going to be separated. So we're not going to treat them as one process. The Gauteng outcome was a product of a negotiation with all GNU partners, including the Democratic Alliance. So government in Gauteng was not arbitrarily formed without the DA. It was a negotiation that included the DA until the last minute. And then without agreeing on terms, the Democratic Alliance decided that they will not be forming part of that government arrangement in Gauteng. Hence, it proceeded the way that it does. That's one. In KwaZulu-Natal, a similar process worked out. The provincial leadership negotiated with other political parties, and they found an agreement that produced the government of provincial unity that you see in KZN. Yeah. What the provincial chairperson of Gauteng was saying is an objective fact that when you are losing 17% in one election cycle, it means electorally you are sinking. So that's an objective reaction to the elections outcome, that if we are to survive, we've got to do something differently in order to reconnect with the electorate and improve our electoral fortunes back to above 51%.
Yeah.
Central to that is to have a leadership capable of marshalling the structures of the ANC and reconnecting with communities across the board. So this is not just implications for provincial leadership structures, but for branch and regional leadership structures as well.
But so this is to say that you are, as briefly as you can, confident in Panyaza Lesufi's leadership as ANC chair and premier of Gauteng?
Panyaza was elected by structures of Gauteng. They are the ones who must have confidence in him. It is not the position of the national office to decide who must be elected and who must not be elected. What national office will do is to assess the capabilities of ANC structures across the country in relation to our electoral performance, but in relation also to the health of our organization on the ground and whether the structures we have possess the required capability to reconnect with communities on the ground. And on the basis of that assessment, decisions will be made going forward.
And could those decisions lead to the dissolving of some of the provincial leadership then?
there is no such a decision as yet. There's no discussion about dissolutions. But if the ANC were to make an assessment of any structure, including a region, and arrive at the conclusion that that structure is not in a good position to take the organization forward, the ANC will have no choice but to reconstitute those structures.
And that
but
could be
now,
provincial structures. So not just local level structures, but provincial structures. You would, after this assessment, could possibly make the decision of dissolution.
It could happen. It could happen, but it's not that is the starting point of discussion. It could happen if the evidence on the ground suggests that there has got to be a change of leadership structures. That would happen at all levels.
Yeah, I'm keen to hear where the time frames are and where we get the report back then, because obviously this speaks to, if possibly dissolution does take place, that has quite big implications on who takes up certain seats in local and provincial government, and certainly the stability in some of these areas. So what are the timeframes that the ANC gives itself to report back on this fact-finding mission of what went wrong with the May 29 elections?
Well, that's been a continuous process. We've already had a National Executive Committee session that considered, firstly, the elections outcomes. But we also did report that we'll be holding a special NEC meeting to deal with the state of the organization, either at the end of August or early September. And that is where all reports about the assessment of the state of the organization will be tabled and considered. Yeah.
And will you be engaging alliance partners in this process? I mean, we saw just this weekend as well, the COSATU Gauteng chairperson also taking to the podium, talking about how there's a sense that the party has lost touch. So will you, in this process, be consulting COSATU, the SACP?
Yes, in fact, even here in KwaZulu-Natal, in all the 11 regional engagements that we've had, members of the alliance were represented. There were regional leaders of COSATU and the SACP. As you saw the COSATU leadership speaking, it was at the ANCP Isilekgotla in Gauteng. So we are in conversation with all alliance partners throughout this process. And we'll continue talking to them as well to see how best can we recalibrate the movement collectively and build a formidable force that can regain the confidence of the people.
Yeah, well, we're gonna leave it there, and we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for speaking to us.